Okay, everyone, hello. This is a very rough video, but what we will do is we're going to go over all of the things that are probably going to be on your midterm exam. As you saw, you have a midterm exam guide and some slides, and I'm going to go through both of those sort of simultaneously so that you know what to expect on the exam. So I'm going to show you my screen. And here are my slides, and we're going to start with the first thing on the plan, which is be able to provide one of the definitions of quality, either Duran, Crosby, Deming, ASQ, or plain English. Now, this is a short answer, so you're going to actually have to memorize one of these definitions, but they're quite short. If you recall, they were Duran's, which were fitness for use, Crosby's, which was conformance to requirements, Deming, which was efficient production of the quality that the market expects, ASQ, which was the totality of features and characteristics of a product that bear on its ability to satisfy a given need, or the plain English one that came from my colleague Hal. Give customers what they expect or more, when they expect it or sooner, for a price they can afford. So as long as you can provide one of those definitions, you are golden. So moving on, something else that's on the study guide. Given a scenario, identify the external and internal customers. And if you recall, we talked about who is a customer with your business. Basically, anyone who is affected by a product or by the process which produces the product is a customer. You can have internal customers or external customers. The external customer is the customer that actually buys the product. But the internal customer can be any of dozens of people inside the business who depends on your process. And so the great example that I used in class is pretend that you are at Subway and there is the person who asks what kind of bread and sandwich, there's the vegetable person, and then there is the cashier. When you go in, you are the external customer. The cashier is the internal customer of both the bread person and the veggie person, because what the cashier does depends on their work. So I hope that makes sense for you. Next, given a product, describe or discuss customer expectations of quality. And this included performance, price, reliability, durability, serviceability, aesthetics, and perceived quality. So these were all those again: performance, price, reliability, durability, serviceability, aesthetics, and perceived quality. For example, performance is that the product or the service performs as better or expected. So, for example, your car handles on curvy roads as expected, accelerates appropriately, brakes appropriately. Price is that it's priced appropriately, and price is dependent on the kind of item, because if it's a luxury good, people sort of expect the price to be higher, like with Apple computers, or say a very expensive vehicle or designer clothing, and we expect to pay less for discount items. Reliability means that the product performs as expected when the customer needs it. So not only does your car start, but it starts every time you turn the ignition switch. You can depend on it. That's reliability. Durability is that the product lasts and holds up as long as expected or better. So for example, your Honda lasts 200,000 miles, or your Tonka truck still works despite running over it with your car. Serviceability doesn't necessarily apply to all items, but for example, that means you can easily find places to service your items. Like you can replace watch batteries, you have an automotive shop that can service your vehicle. Aesthetics is all the things that people expect that are pleasing to the senses. For example, the design of Apple products is one of the reasons that people buy them. The packaging, I use the example in class of I buy the Caesar dog food because of the purple package and the cute little white dog on the package, because I want my dog to be happy. And then finally is perceived quality. And that means that the customer has an idea, an opinion of the individual quality, and it's not necessarily objective. So you may have a store brand of green beans and a Del Monte can of green beans, excuse me, I just yawned, which are both produced in the same factory, but the customer may perceive Del Monte as superior because it is a name brand. Okay, the next question on the study guide is, what did you learn about quality and ethics from All My Sons? How did Joe Keller's experiences in the play relate to those working in quality in 2017? For this particular one, I need you to think back over your experience watching the movie. I do have a link on Blackboard for the movie if you should like to watch it again. Also, there are, in the study guide, there is a synopsis of what happens in the movie. So I want you to think about it and think about the lessons that it tells about quality and relate that to people working in quality today. This is going to be an essay question. A good answer will probably be maybe 3 paragraphs. So this is not something where you write down 4 words. This is an essay question that's going to be worth 15 points out of 100. So you do need to give it a substantial answer, and that's why I'm giving you the question in advance to think about. Next is an easy one. Define caveat emptor, which is a Latin phrase. It means let the buyer beware. Let the buyer beware. And we talked about this in the context of in primitive societies when we were doing trading in the marketplace. There was before there were any consumer protections like warranties or anything of that sort. Basically, if you traded for something or bought something, you did so at your own risk. Next on the study guide, be able to critique and explain the weakness of typical manufacturing organizational structure before and during World War II. So what I mean by this is if you look at this particular hierarchy, toward the end of World War II, most organizations were organized this way. You had production reporting directly to a CEO, and you had quality reporting directly to production. In this case, that gives you a natural conflict of interest between quality and production. Because if production is calling the shots over quality, what can happen is anything that is questionable, it will end up being the quality. Quality will go for the sake of production. So be aware of that and be able to discuss that. And that will be a short essay question. In other words, about a couple of sentences. You should be able to explain that. And this is an example of what most companies look like today. So if you're trying to kind of get an idea of what it might look like now, that is how. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about are the quality foundations, and there are several quiz questions about that. First of all, we're going to ask you to be able to identify the internal and external failure costs of quality and to be able to give examples of each. So to look at the costs of quality, as you recall, there were 4 types of costs of quality: internal failure costs, external failure costs, appraisal costs, and prevention costs. Now, the 2 most important are internal and external. Internal failure costs are the costs associated with defective products, components, and materials that fail to meet quality requirements and cause manufacturing losses. These very specifically are the costs associated with things that you discover before they get to the customer. These are costs that happen before you get to the customer. So in other words, you inspect something, you discover that it is not fit for sale, and you pull it rather than ship it. So examples that you could do of internal failure costs would be scrap, rework, reinspection or retesting. Something like downgrading. Let's say you were a lumber mill and you were going for a certain quality of lumber, but you weren't quite hitting that quality, you could still sell that lumber, but it would have to be at a downgraded price, or something like seconds in a clothing factory. You wouldn't be able to sell them for full price at your flagship store, but you might be able to sell them at an outlet mall, that kind of thing. So that's an example of internal failure costs. Next is going to be external failure costs. Those are the costs generated by defective products that actually get to the customer. These are products that are actually shipped and get to the customer. And this also includes lost opportunities for sales. So this is anything bad that actually got to a customer. So an example of that might be a warranty, a sales or service call, returns, complaints, factory or installation errors. So those two slides will pretty much answer the question on this test. There are two other types of costs. Those are appraisal costs, and appraisal costs would be anything that has to do with testing, measuring, evaluating. So if you have inspection stations for incoming goods or for outgoing finished goods, that kind of thing, those are appraisal costs. And second would be prevention costs, and those would be anything to do with trying to improve overall quality, like your quality planning, maybe the staff of your quality department, any quality projects, quality training or audits. Those kinds of costs are associated with prevention costs. Next, we're going to talk about the Duran trilogy. The Duran trilogy was created by our guru, Joseph Duran, and basically it looks at quality management as a whole as being made up of three components: quality planning, quality control, and quality management. Basically, quality planning is putting together a system that is capable of meeting your quality standards. Quality control is used to determine when corrective action is required. In other words, quality control is where you're inspecting stuff and seeing if it's good or not. And then quality improvement seeks better ways of doing things. And Duran's idea is that you need all three of those to effectively manage for quality. Finally, quality management. These were the principles of quality management. Remember, there are 8 of them. You were going to have an essay question on this worth 15 points, which is discuss what you think the principle means in your work environment. In other words, you choose one of the principles of quality management, one of the 8, and in your work environment, whether that be banking, manufacturing, healthcare, retail, government, whatever, how well do you think your workplace embodies this principle? Give specific examples of how your workplace is doing a good job of embodying it, and specific examples of how your workplace is falling short. And then give me your idea of how you think your workplace can do better. So basically, this should be several paragraphs. 5 or 6 paragraphs would be a good choice for this to actually answer it in its entirety. And to remind you, the 8 quality principles were customer focus, leadership, involvement of people, process approach, system approach to management, continual improvement, factual approach to decision making, and mutually beneficial supplier relationships. And there's a little bit more information about each of those on the slides that follow, but you have these slides, so you have a chance to take a look at them and kind of put your head around them again. Now, getting to the math part, there are several things that you're going to be required to do. Given a set of 5 measurements and a list of 6 steps to calculate a standard deviation, calculate mean, mode, median, range, and standard deviation. That's one of the first ones. I also have several others, which is given a standard deviation, calculate the variance. Given the variance, calculate the standard deviation. Given the mean and the standard deviation, sketch a bell curve and show 3 standard deviations above and below the mean. And given a bell curve such as the one described in question 7, be able to describe a given data point in relationship to the mean. So we're going to look at, first of all, the steps here, and then I'm going to give you examples. So first of all, we're going to be dealing with the common measures of central tendency, which are mean, median, and mode. The mean being the average, median being the midpoint, and mode being the most frequently occurring. Mean is where you take all the numbers you have and you add them together and divide them by how many numbers there are. So in other words, we take these 6 numbers and add them together, divide it by 6, and that gives you the mean. Median requires you to put your numbers in sequence from low to high. If you have an odd number of numbers, your median is the middle one. If you have an even number of numbers, you average the 2 middle. So here's an odd number. There are 7 numbers here, so 52 is right in the middle. That is your median. Here are even numbers. 52 and 52 are the 2 middle numbers, so you average those, bringing out 52 to be the median. Mode is much simpler. Mode is the most frequently reoccurring number. So you can see in this case very easily 52 is the most frequently occurring number. Sometimes there is no mode, so the answer might be no mode. Sometimes there could be several modes, but usually on any of my test questions, there's either going to be a mode very clearly or there very clearly won't be a mode. Next, we're going to talk about measures of spread, and if the number is high on any of these measures, that means you have high variation. So the measures we're going to look at are the range, the variance, and the standard deviation. The range is the difference between their largest number, the max, and the smallest number, the min. So 70 minus 27 here is going to be 43. The variance is the square of the standard deviation. So basically, if you learn the standard deviation, all you have to do is square it to get the variance. What that means then is if you know the standard deviation, multiply it by itself to get the variance. If you know the variance, take the square root to get the standard deviation. So here's how we're going to do standard deviation. This is the formula, but instead of worrying about the formula, we're going to use my 6 steps, which are calculate the mean, then subtract the mean from each data point, not worrying if the answer is negative, square each of the answers, add the answers together, divide that number by the number of values minus 1, and then take the square root. So here's the example. We add numbers together to collect the mean. We subtract the mean from each of the values. We square the results. We add them together, divide it by the number of numbers minus 1, in this case that's 5, and then we take the result and take the square root of it to come up with the standard deviation. So I am going to work some problems for you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. So hello, here I'm going to come back. Hello, here I am. Hi. And I'm going to share a different screen with you. I'm going to share an Excel screen with you. So here is Excel, and in Excel I have put 5 numbers. Let's do the descriptive statistics on this. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out the mean. The mean is simply the average. So it is going to be these numbers added together. And I'm going to use some Excel here. I'm going to do a sum of these numbers. And then I'm going to divide it by 5 because I have 5 numbers. And that's my mean. I could also have done that using an average function. So I will show you that too. Equal average would have given me the same result. Okay, so the mean is 23.2. Now, the median. To do the median easily, put the numbers in low to high order. So we're going to do 21, 23, 23, 24, 25. 23 is right in the middle, so 23 is the median. You can also see in this set of numbers that 23 is the recurring number, so the mode is also 23. Now, to calculate the range is the highest number minus the lowest number. So 25 minus 21 is going to be 4. That's your range. Now, to calculate the standard deviation, we're going to go through quite a few steps. Yes, there's an easier way to do it in Excel, but I'm going to show you the math way first, and then I'll quickly show you the function. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to take this 23.2, and we are going to subtract it from each of these numbers. So 21 minus the mean is negative 2.2, and I'm going to copy that down so that you can see that we've just done here 23 minus 23.2, 24 minus 23.2, 23 minus 23.2, 25 minus 23.2. Then we're going to square each of these. And I'm just using Excel formulas to do that, but basically squaring is multiplying the number by itself. Now, all those that I've multiplied by itself, I'm going to add those together. I can do it manually, but I'm going to use a sum function in Excel to add them all together. So it comes out to 8.8. So now, to get the variance, I'm going to take the 8.8 and divide it by how many numbers I have, minus 1. So there are 5 numbers, so I'm going to divide it by 4, and that's going to give me 2.2. And if I stop right there, that is the variance. But to get the actual answer, I'm going to take the square root of this number, and that's going to give me 1.48 as my standard deviation. Now, if I want a quicker way to figure out that standard deviation, I could have just used equal STDEV, open parentheses, and selected those numbers, and it would tell me the standard deviation. Now, if I want to know the variance, I've got the variance. The variance is basically 2.2 because I got it on the way. But if you notice, if I take 1.48 and multiply 1.48 times itself, that's going to give me basically 2.2. So you'll notice that you can always get the variance that way. Now, the next thing that you're going to look at is take a look at a bell curve. Now, I am not very good at drawing a bell curve, but I'm going to give you sort of an approximate one here. I'm going to take a curved line, and I'm going to literally draw a curve. It's not very good, but it's a curve. Okay, and then underneath it, I'm going to put my mean, which we're going to call 23 for right now. And my standard deviation is basically 1.5. So I'm going to say 23 plus 1.5 is going to be 24.5. 24.5 plus 1.5 is going to be 26. And 26 plus 1.5 is going to be 27.5. So we're going to call this 0. We're going to call this +1. Oops. We're going to call that +1. We're going to call this +2. We're going to call this +3. We're subtracting 23 minus 1.5 is going to be 21.5. Am I right there? Yeah. And that's going to be -1. This is going to be 20. That's going to be -2. And this is going to be 18.5, which is going to be -3. Okay, we'll presume that I have a line here. So let me draw a line real quick. And I'm going to draw another line that takes me from here down to here to I see where my mean is. So here's the mean, median mode. So what that's showing me is that 24.5 is 1 standard deviation above the mean, 26 is 2 standard deviations above the mean, 27 is 0.5 is 3 standard deviations above the mean. So if I look at any of the individual data points, and let's say I'm going to choose 21. 21 would fall about here. 21 would fall right there. So 21 is going to be more than 1 standard deviation above the mean. Sorry, below the mean. More than 21 is more than 1 standard deviation below the mean. Whereas 25 is more than 2 standard deviations above the mean. That's what we're talking about in terms of the data points. So that should give you an idea. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Here I am back again. Hello. And I'm going to go back to the slides. Give me just a second and I will get you there. Okay. Now, probably the last thing that you need to know would be the match the quality guru with his accomplishments. I'd love to say his or her, but unfortunately there aren't any hers here. But that's Duran, Deming, Crosby, Feigenbaum, Ishikawa, Taguchi, and Shingo. So here are some basics. Deming was responsible for the 14 points, the red bead experiment, the concept of profound knowledge, and although Walter Shewhart created the Shewhart wheel, which is the plan, do, check, act, Deming was the person who popularized it. Joseph Duran popularized the Pareto principle and was responsible for the concept of the quality trilogy. Philip Crosby was the guy who said the performance standard should be 0 defects, and that the idea was to do things right the first time. Shigeo Shingo was famous for setup reduction, specifically using single-minute exchange of dies, or SMED. Kaoru Ishikawa was responsible for 2 major things, quality circles, and then a concept called root cause analysis, which is called a fishbone diagram, or just as often called after him an Ishikawa diagram. Armand Feigenbaum was responsible for the concept of the hidden plant, and the idea that the hidden plant is costing you money, and that quality has to be a way of managing And then finally, Taguchi was responsible for the concept of robust products and processes that could hold up to lots of problems, and then offline quality control. So those were the major ideas. So the idea that you could use this to help you get ready for the matching portion on your exam. So let me stop sharing. Basically, this exam is going to be held in class on March 6th. So that's the next time that I see you. So there will be no class on February, is it 27th? I think it's 27th. There is no class on that Monday, but do use these materials to help you prepare for the midterm. And when you come back in class, I will give you the midterm, and that's the only thing we're going to do that night. So I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.